Michael Winzloff, machinist mate, second class. I was scheduled to be drafted, and I made the choice to enlist instead and take my chances because that was prime time in 1965 during the Vietnam War. And there were a lot of friends of mine coming back. They're coming back, but they weren't alive. The funeral homes were filling up. So I decided to do it on my own and take my chances and join the Navy. I went to boot camp in 1966. I enlisted. Well, I was inducted down at Fort Wayne, downtown Detroit, and once you're inducted there, you go through all your shots and everything. They throw you on a bus and they bus you over to Great Lakes, Illinois, and you're in the Navy now. In boot camp, well, it's always different, you know. I mean, for everybody, it's something you've never done before, and it's something that you have to get used to, and you have to learn to take orders. That's all there is to it. I think those are the things that you have to get used to, but I think it's great for anybody, and I strongly advise anybody to go into the military just so they can be able to get that training to actually be able to listen to somebody and do what they're told, because a lot of kids nowadays don't do that. In boot camp, they taught us how to be a sailor, how to dress, how to take care of yourself. They had swimming, make sure you knew how to swim, knew how you life-saving techniques by taking your dungarees off, tying knots in the legs, getting them wet, collecting air and putting them underneath your arms. You use it as a life preserver. Along with that, then you had firefighting techniques where you had they put you in buildings and where the bilges are on fire, and you had to take your hoses and learn how to either pushed it back with spray or water, or in some instances with the firefighting foam, to be able to any shipboard happenings where there was a disaster or a problem, that you knew how to take a piece of wood if you had a breach in the hull and use it as a damage control plug to plug stop the leak, and just an all-around general way to be able to take care of yourself, handle yourself, and become a good naval person. It wasn't bad. I mean, everybody complained about the food, but me, I eat anything, so it doesn't bother me, and I didn't think it was all that bad. Completed boot camp, and was fortunate enough when I got my orders of where to go to be sent to the USS Observation Island. A lot of people were trying to get on board that ship because it was very good duty. As a matter of fact, I had just before I left boot camp, I had a footlocker got knocked over and it hit me in the head, and I had to go to sick bay for stitches. And when I went in there, I had already had my orders of where I was going to be sent, and they seen where I was going to be sent, and they were just razzing me to death because, oh, you boot, you get the good duty, and we have to suffer where we're at. So that's kind of how it all began. I went through boot camp. I was ended up to be an educational petty officer while I was there, which gave me a little extra benefits while I was in boot camp. And after boot camp, got my orders to go to the Observation Island, and I reported there after I came home and got married. I came home from boot camp and married my bride, and then was sent off to the Observation Island, reported aboard, and did 4 years of duty on the same ship. Started out as a fireman recruit in the engineering division. Worked my way, of course, everybody when you go on there as a recruit, you start out in the galley, peeling potatoes and washing dishes and whatever else is necessary, scrubbing floors, until you put in there a certain amount of time, and then you get transferred to whatever division and whatever rate you're going for. And in my case, it was a machinist mate. And I got stuck into A division, and A division was heating, air conditioning, refrigeration, and I was responsible for all the galley equipment, all the chilled water systems, compressors for the chilled water systems for the air conditioning throughout the ship, all the air handlers, all the refrigeration equipment for the galley, the reefers, anything that had to do with refrigeration, the drinking fountains, the scuttlebutts. And there was a very good chief petty officer who was in charge of the A division. His name was Chief Don Miles. And me as a young kid, he took me under his wing, and he says, "Boy," he says, "I'm going to give you a career." And I says, "Where have I heard that before?" You hear these things and never know whether they're going to come true or not. But anyhow, he sent me to ACNR school at Great Lakes, and I completed the course. They cram a 2-year college course down you in like 8 weeks, and I ended up coming in second in my class out of about 30 students. And like they say, the rest is history. After I got off the ship, when I was discharged 42 years later, I retired from that trade. So he indeed did give me a career. So as far as the shipboard goes, the shipboard life, like I said, you start your way at the bottom, you work your way up. I did all the courses and everything that I needed to advance from a recruit to an E3 petty officer, and continued on doing the same thing, taking courses and completing all the stuff that I needed to complete. And I ended up 4 years later, well, before the 4 years was up, being discharged as an E5 second class machinist mate. And there was no first class to run that air conditioning division at that time. And so I was one that ended up running the whole shipboard air conditioning refrigeration division. So of course I had officers and chiefs above me, but as far as the enlisted person, it was me. And it was very good duty. I enjoyed it immensely, all the 4 years that I was on there. Yeah, and like I say, you start at the bottom, work your way up, and looking backwards, you're young and dumb and stuff like that and you can't wait to get out. Had I had more sense and knew then what I know now, I wish I would have kind of stayed in longer, but I didn't. Mess decks, nice big, large mess deck. The funny part about the mess deck was we had a fish tank on it. And so the aquarium was back there on the mess deck, and a lot of people got a little seasick during rough weather, because they'd sit there and watch that fish tank and watch that water level go back and forth like that. But it never got bad enough to spill too much water out of it. But we had stabilizers on this ship. And I don't know whether you know what stabilizers are, but they're fins that go out and kind of keep the ship stable. That was one of the watches that I had to stand over through time, was stabilizer watch. And then I also had to spend a lot of time in the engine room. Had stand evaporator watch. Evaporator watch is what makes the fresh water for the ship when you're out at sea. And also had to go down and check shaft alley, the big shaft that goes back and turns the propeller, and all the bearings along the shaft. There's bearings that have to maintain lubrication. And when you get all the way down to the fantail, where the shaft goes through the hull, there's a seal, and it has to maintain a certain water flow through it in order to keep the seals cool. So that was part of my duties as a machinist mate in the A division. Was evaporator watch, shaft alley, stabilizer, and then down in the compressor rooms. Depending on which part of the ship you were in, it all had a distinct smell, you know. If you were in the engine room, there was a lot of the big, I can't remember what number fuel oil that they burned in the, but the boilers were all oil fired. So when you're down in the engine room, you smell the fuel. You know, it just happens like that. And then a lot of steam, and you had to be very careful around. We only had a 600-pound steam system, where some of the other ships had 1,200-pound steam. But anytime you get around steam like that, if you get a pinhole leak and you don't need it, you don't notice it, it could hurt you bad. It could get a good slice on you. Making sure that the seawater strainers were clean, for the cooling lines for the condensers, and everything necessary to keep the shipboard air conditioning running. That was myself standing the evaporator watch. That's the desalination, is the evaporator. Well, it's just a combination of steam. It takes the salt water and it flashes off the and separates the salt from the water, and the fresh water goes one way, and then the other water, the byproducts go the other direction, and then it's pumped into the shipboard freshwater tanks. That ship was very good duty. We got to see a lot of country. Home ported here in Port Canaveral, and went through a couple of yard periods in Virginia. Being a missile test ship, we did a lot of at-sea firings off of our ship, and plus worked with the nuclear subs and did the circumference around the nuclear sub. And we had a lot of civilian telemetry people on our ship that did the watching the shot from the nuclear submarines. So that's what we did for 4 years, or what I did for 4 years, was back and forth from Florida to Pearl Harbor, because we'd pick up birds on the West Coast and go to Pearl Harbor and fire off of that firing range over there. There's 2 firing ranges. There's one off of the coast of Hawaii that shoots over towards Japan, and then there's another firing range off the coast of Florida that shoots over off the coast of Africa. That's the 2 firing ranges. So, and the only boring time was when we went out for, we used to call it buoy chasing, but it was just to do what we had to do, marking and stuff. I think about the longest time that I can remember myself being at sea was about 3 months. But we knew that we were out for a long time when you went to breakfast and the green egg started hitting the grill. So we knew it was time, and the powdered eggs and the powdered milk come out. We knew because other than that, we had very good food. It was a good ship, a good galley, a good cooks, and we always ate like kings. So the ship, it depended on what our load or service duty was for the day. I mean, if we were just going to go out and work with a nuclear submarine, that we'd go out and work with the nuclear submarine. If it was just to go out, most of the time we were in port and just tied up, and you just had your standard duties. And then when we did leave, if we were going to go someplace else, we'd go down through the Panama Canal and go to Hawaii, or up the Atlantic and go to Norfolk for yard periods. I went through 1 yard period. And that's when they changed from Polaris missiles to the Poseidon missiles, because that's what we did was the first successful at-sea firing of the Polaris and Poseidon missiles before they put them on the nuclear subs. Yeah, it depends on what the mission was for today, whether the ship left or did not leave, and what we were either going to go out and work with the nuclear subs, or we were going out to go someplace specific. When we were going to Hawaii, we would stop on the West Coast in Bremerton, Washington. There's a place there. When we were in Florida, I can't even remember where we got them loaded there, or where they came from. Well, we had a lot of civilians on our ship. It was for the telemetry for the missiles. When the missiles were fired, we had a lot of telemetry equipment that would keep an eye on when the missile broke the surface and where it was going and just keeping track of it. So they call that some kind of telemetry. So that's we had a lot of civilians that did that. Every once in a while, we'd be tailed by a Russian trawler because they were very interested in the space program. So there was always a Russian trawler somewhere in the vicinity when we were during maneuvers. And it got worse after I left, where we have a lot of newspaper pictures where it got really bad, because once the bird was fired, they were out there trying to pick up the whatever debris that gets blown out when the missile goes off. They get these shoes or something that kind of keeps it stabilized in the center, so when the bird goes off, those go flying. So they were out there trying to pick it up. But we also drop a boat in the water after it's fired too, so we actually got to it first. But it was just one of those things where they come in pretty close proximity of each other, trying to pick up the pieces there. Really there wasn't not a lot of rough water. I don't remember a lot of rough water, but I believe in the one time when we were on that buoy chasing, like I said, between Florida and heading out down towards off the coast of Africa. I think that was the Atlantic was one of the roughest times that we had, because I can remember getting up on board or up on deck and looking at the front of the boat and just seeing nothing but sea and then nothing but sky. And then sometimes, and most of the time, we were pretty stable, but there's ladders that goes if you want to go from one deck to another. And when we were listing so much on a really rough sea, I mean, you'd be walking up a ladder, and then all of a sudden you're almost walking straight, and then you're walking up a ladder again. So, but I think that's the only time I can remember it was very rough, and I think that was just for that one long haul that we had. Pacific, I don't remember it ever being very bad at all between Panama and Hawaii. When you cross the equator is when you have the big ceremony and things get a little carried away. But I don't know whether it's fortunately or unfortunately, but I never did get to cross the equator in my time. Other guys on the ship before me did, and we have pictures and videos of what happened when they were going across there, and how they had to kiss Buddha's belly and crawl through grease and all that other stuff. You know, it's just a kind of I don't even think you could get away with stuff like that nowadays. Never being in Hawaii before, I thought it was kind of nice to just to see it. So, and get to see the Waikiki Beach and everything else is involved in there, and even going through Pearl Harbor and the Arizona Monument, and just being in that particular place, knowing what happened in December 7th, 1941, was kind of emotionally at that time. We were there to test the missiles. We went over there to fire missiles on that firing range from Pearl Harbor over towards Japan. That just happens to be the firing range over there. So we had, when we fired birds, it was either over on the East Coast or over off of Hawaii. And that was the whole purpose of going over there, was we stop in Bremerton, Washington, pick up birds and go over there and fire them. There was two missiles. There was 2 Polaris tubes and 2 Poseidon tubes. So you only carried, whichever one and when I first went on board, there was only Polaris tubes. And then after our yard period in 69, then they put Poseidon tubes on. So most of my time was with the Polaris. So you always had, if you were going, when we picked up birds, we'd pick up 2. Well, about the only thing that I could say is that the chief that took me aside and gave me a career, Chief Don Mile, made my time in the service well worthwhile, because, like I said, when I got out 42 years later, I retired from the trade. If I didn't have that, I don't know what I would have been doing. Well, when you're young, 4 years lasts a long time, but in hindsight, it went pretty quick. Why I ended up on the same ship for 4 years, I don't know. I think it's kind of uncommon. Most people, a lot of people, even the ones that are here, that were only on there for a couple of years, and a lot of guys got moved around from place to place. And it may be that some people request to be transferred too. But I was fine with it. Like I said, I used to call it the good ship lollipop. I know it was the Empire State, which was a merchant vessel at the time. At the end, it was taken to Beaumont, Texas, and put into mothballs. And then after that, it was sold to a scrap yard in Texas. And then they cut it up and scrapped it. Sold for scrap.